everyone. It is Antonetta Mosley with I Follow the Leader, and I am so excited today for episode 21 of Conversations with I Follow the Leader. How can rest save you from burnout? How can rest save you from burnout? For those watching, please put in the chat where are you watching from? We want to talk with you throughout this conversation. And I have the distinct pleasure of having our guest on today, Dr. Shelly Bhowmik. And so a lot of you saw about this conversation. It is likely to be our most vulnerable conversation to date. So thank you for being here today. Shelly Bhowmik, MD, MPH, is the founder of Platform Wellness, a wellness practice dedicated to helping women with burnout. Dr. Bhowmik is a double board certified physician specializing in preventive medicine and lifestyle medicine. She earned her medical degree from the George Washington School of Medicine and Health Science and completed her master's in public health and preventive medicine residency at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She was a design thinking strategist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles and has served as a medical director of digital health for an executive health firm in New York City. She is now the founder at Platform Wellness. And so I'm so excited. Dr. Shelly Bhowmik, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes. And, I told Shelly behind the scenes that really we've received so much engagement and just so many people are interested in this conversation. And so I think that's really important to state that people want to know how can I prevent burnout, or if they've been in a place of burnout, how can they recover? So if you can just tell us a little more about who you are, and we want to start today. This is Shelly's question she has on her website with how are you? And so let's start with how are you and let us know why that's so important.
Yes, yes. No, thank you. Thank you again for having me. Yes, how are you is the most important question that I can ask a patient or a client when I'm working with them because it reveals so much about how somebody is doing, much more than I could ever, get at by asking more pointed questions. Just the open-endedness of how are you? It creates that space, that warm, inviting space for somebody to really show up and show up as they are, as they truly are. So that's the most important question I can ask, and that we all can ask. But no, I can go into my story a little bit if you'd like, just kind of explain why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. As you mentioned, I'm a preventive and lifestyle medicine physician. I'm based here in New York City, and my practice, Platform Wellness, is really dedicated to helping women of color in particular, with burnout and healing from burnout. And that comes from my own experiences with stress and burnout and mental health. Mental health issues are something that I've dealt with on and off throughout the years. Usually there's a triggering event in your life, and that might spark these types of issues. And for me, it was losing my mom to cancer when I was in college. That definitely, that definitely was the starting point for me. And so I've dealt with it on and off, and it wasn't until though the beginning of 2020 that I realized just uh, you know, how bad of a place I was in. I didn't see it. I didn't recognize it, and literally didn't understand how bad it had gotten until one Friday evening rush hour. I was standing on the edge of the subway platform, asking myself if I should push myself over the edge, into the train. And uh, that was such a, you know, it was such a pivotal moment for me because I had never experienced anything like that before, any actionable thought like that before. And so, to have stepped away from that edge, literally, figuratively, that that took a lot. And I'm one of those folks who was so thankful to go into lockdown at the beginning of COVID, of the beginning of the pandemic, because I really needed that time and that space to, to work on myself, to heal. And it was through that, during that time and through that process, that I experienced just how powerful the mind can be. I like to say that mindset is medicine. And I truly believe that it's the best medicine when it comes to, dealing with stress and handling burnout. These limiting beliefs that we all hold, they tend to fuel this burnout that we then create. And so, and given that this is an audience passionate about DEI issues, I'll go into a little bit of what I experienced in terms of my own limiting beliefs. For me, I realized that this feeling of not being enough was what was really driving the burnout, and it came from, it had to do with colorism. For me, I'm South Asian, and in our culture, having dark skin is looked down upon. You're considered less than in the culture. And so that's a message that I absorbed very early on in childhood. And what I didn't realize is that that message, it permeated into every aspect of my life thereafter. I strove for perfection in everything that I did because I always felt like I wouldn't be enough unless I went that extra step, that extra mile. And so that fueled the burnout that kept me, I kept pushing myself and pushing myself, and I pushed myself so far that I came up to that edge of that subway platform. And and again, it wasn't until I realized that I had this limiting belief and that I could change this belief, that was truly powerful for me, to realize that these thoughts that I have, these beliefs that I hold to be true, you know, you know, realizing that they're not true, realizing that I could deconstruct them, I could construct something that was more, um, you know, that was just healthier for me. That was just mind blowing for me. And so again, yeah, that's why I say mindset is medicine. And as a physician, I really feel like it's my duty to make sure that, I can help as many people. I don't want other folks to have to get to the extreme, have to get to the edge of whatever platform they're standing on. And so that's why I decided to start my practice and to go into this work, because it's so important. I know a lot of people are struggling with this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just so powerful. And I just want to pause and say thank you for being willing to be vulnerable, to share your story, right? So many people are suffering in silence, and our society hasn't encouraged people to say that they've gone through mental health issues or seek a therapist. And I just think it's so important as leaders that we share, right? It is okay to get help for yourself. I love the mindset is medicine and challenging those limiting beliefs. So I really want to encourage leaders out there to really think of that mindset as medicine, and also realizing you make it help, right? So many people encourage getting a coach, etc. I really encourage getting a therapist, right? Talking to a therapist when things are going great and when things are not can really help you work on your mindset, because we have to realize, like you talked about with colorism, etc. For those of us living in the United States, there are a lot of systems that have been in place for those who are underrepresented, or as Arlen Hamilton likes to say, underestimated, right? So often these underestimated groups have these systems that haven't encouraged them to be their whole self. And if you go to Shelly's website, and we'll share it, you talk a lot just about colorism and those limiting beliefs, but also the importance of being whole. And I love a quote you have there. It's like, it says that you are enough and that being healthy means being whole. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, yeah. This is something that I realized early on in my medical training. When I was studying to for the exam to get into medical school, that's when my mom was actually dying of cancer, and so she was really my first patient, to be honest, and I learned so much through that relationship. And being the caregiver in that situation, I got to see just how important all the domains of life are. It's not just about your physical health, it's your psychological health, your social health, your spiritual health. All of that contributes to whether or not you are well. And so that is something, that was ingrained in me early on in my training, and I've carried that with me throughout medical school, throughout residency, and in the work I do today. Um, you know, I can't have blinders on. I have to when I have a patient in front of me, or a client in front of me, there's just so much more to the story. And so again, asking the question, "How are you?" Uh, that opens up, you know, for people to share their story. So
Thank you. And yeah, really want to encourage the leaders out there. We were talking before we came on. The pandemic is still going on. People are still struggling with isolation, with having to do more than they were before, with COVID, with sickness, with the threat of getting sick and missing work, etc. And so, really important that those of us realize maybe you have a situation where you don't have kids or where this hasn't been a struggle, but realizing that so many people are suffering in silence and are isolated even more than ever before. There's been so much loss over the past 2 years. And so just taking the time, right? Adding time into your meetings to just say, how are you? How have you been? What's going on is so important. So I really appreciate that. I
yeah.
know you have this amazing framework that you developed. And so before we go into that, I would love to know more about the journey for you, right? From being really on that edge to now having a successful business. What did that look like? Why did you decide I really have to do this? People need your help.
Yeah, no, I mean, it relates back to the framework, which I know we're going to go over. And again, these are the framework. These are the same steps that I had to go through in order to kind of get to this other side. And so I want to be able to help other people through this transition. And just want to comment on something you just said too. I know we were talking before going live about how at the beginning of the pandemic, right, the Zoom meetings, they would all start with folks asking one another how they're doing. And you know for whatever reason, that's stopped, that's fallen to the wayside, and we need to bring that back, especially in virtual environments. This is something that I like to mention to corporate audiences. We don't have the benefit of walking by someone's desk and reading their body language and just kind of seeing how they're doing in their environment. We are literally, all we get is this little screen here, this little rectangle in front of us. And so you have to be even more deliberate and in terms of figuring out, okay, how are your people doing? And so one of the ways is to just ask the question. There are other ways too, but that's always a good place to start.
Thank you for sharing that. And obviously you are a doctor, and so some people may be on and they say, how do I know if I'm at burnout? How do I know if I'm approaching burnout? So can you let us know that? What does that mean? What does burnout really mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And, I think it's important to make the distinction between burnout versus depression versus anxiety. Each of these have their own set of signs and symptoms. And burnout in particular, people may not know this, but the World Health Organization has recognize burnout as a syndrome, and they talk about burnout as a phenomenon that happens in the occupational context, as workplace stressors that aren't well managed. And in particular, there are three characteristics of burnout to look out for. So the first one is low energy, which I think a lot of people can relate to, feeling depleted. And so that is one characteristic of burnout. The second one is feelings of negativism and cynicism, just not feeling like not being pumped about the work that you're doing anymore. And then the third being decrease in your performance or efficiency. If you see that you just aren't you know that you're just not meeting that same bar that you've set for yourself, then that is another indicator of that burnout could be at play. So those are the three in particular characteristics that people can look out for.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I am going to screen share now so we can talk about your REST framework, which, what an amazing word, right? What an amazing acronym for burnout. And so excited for you to just tell us more about what REST is and how it can help people.
Yes, yes. So REST stands for revive, strive, and thrive. And this framework itself, it's broken out into three parts, which you can see here in front of you. Revive is all about overcoming the burnout. Strive is about handling the stress, and thrive is really about restoring your energy and resilience. And so again, these are the 9 steps that I had to go through in order to again, in order to heal. And I think they're important for everyone to be aware of. I'll just read these out loud really quickly, and we can kind of go deeper on a couple of them if you want. But yeah, the steps are to detect distress, to secure space, to seek support, to restore routine, to tackle triggers, to master mindset, to ease efforts, hone habits, and cultivate connections. So those are the 9 altogether.
This is great. And I think what we see in this really is the connections, right? The collaborations, the support. And so knowing that you likely will not be able to do it alone, right? You will need a support system. You will need tools and strategies, which is something we talk about in DEI as well, right? Which is also so important just for health and mindset, knowing that you may not have all the answers and really seeking the help and support that you need, which takes, right, this courage, right? We call these courageous conversations in quotes because our hope is that in 5 years these conversations won't be courageous. They'll be commonplace in the workplace. You'll be able to go to your supervisor and say, I need a day to rest, right? Or I need to take some time off, or actually I'm not doing well today and can we reschedule this meeting for later in the week?
Yeah, yeah. You bring up a good point. Just again, being very deliberate about these conversations. Uh, you know, I recommend to the corporate world that talking about taking breaks, like it's important to incorporate those conversations into your everyday meeting. For example, if you have quarterly or yeah, if you do quarterly reviews, being able to not only go over someone's performance, but then also check in on them and say, okay, hey, you have X number of vacation days. Are you going to be taking some
Yep.
breaks? Like, let's make sure that you use up this time that you rightfully have. That's something that you can be checking on with your team. So it's there are different ways, different ways that you can go about this to help others.
I love that. And I think it's so important. And we talked about this a little before, but when we talked previously, a note I made is just right. A lot of this is impacting those who are underrepresented and feel that they have to be right 2 to 3 times as good. And I think we've both seen that. And a lot of times that is the case to get ahead. If you are in a minority group, that you do have to work 2 to 3 times as hard to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. I know you work a lot with professional women of color to help them heal from burnout. And I know we will have a lot of women like that watching or listening. So, what advice do you have for them who, right, you had to do that to get ahead? So, once you get there, how can you really honor and respect your time, your space, etc.?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to give yourself grace. If you are in a place where things are becoming stressful, where you feel like you are burning out, yeah, being able to just give yourself the grace to slow down and pause. I think that's one of the most important things. And I know that for a lot of folks it gets, I mean, and it happened to me too. It gets to an extreme. We don't pause, we don't stop until it really gets very far. And so one tip that I like to give people is to really focus on the body. The body knows before the mind when we encounter stress. And so even little things like, your breath becoming quicker, your heart starting to beat a little bit faster, all of those, you have a body of data. You literally have a body of data. All of those are data points to tell you, okay, you know what? Something doesn't feel right in this environment to me. So let me just pause. Let me just notice, first of all. That's where a lot of this mindfulness work comes into play. Let me just pause. Let me just notice, and then you'll have a more clear mind to then figure out, okay, what do I do about this situation? Yeah, this is something I noticed for a while. Anytime I opened my inbox, or before I would open my inbox, my heart would start racing, and it really threw me off, because it's not like there's some monster in the inbox that's going to jump out and attack me, but that's what it felt like. That's what my body could feel. And so noticing that was the first step, and then being able to just deal with that, to take some deep breaths, to remind myself, okay, you know what, I can handle this. I can, whatever is in there, I will be able to handle. It's really, noticing these bodily changes is so important. These are your emotions. And so noticing those emotions, acknowledging the emotions, feeling all of the emotions, it's so important to do. Don't hide them, don't push them down, because it's going to take more energy to hide and to push away. If you let yourself experience them, then you're able to do something about them afterwards. So
Thank you.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I wrote down a body of data. We talk about a lot what gets measured gets managed, and your body is the same way. Are you measuring and managing your body? I think a lot of people in the pandemic had increased stress, had increased weight gain, right? And then sometimes you look at the end of the year. I know this was for me, and went, I have to do something differently. I've been working too much, right? I haven't been having as many connections. And so I think it's so important for leaders. We definitely set the tone. And so something I told my team mid year last year was, I'm going to try to only check my email twice a day. Right. So we really want to move to Trello for communications, because you do sometimes feel, if you're just checking your email, and I always have to check myself on this, right? Everything is not an emergency, but you often get in that mindset. If you're just getting alerts all day long, you're constantly shifting and thinking everything is an emergency. And so leaders out there, we really have to encourage, like you said, Shelly, for others to take vacation, to really take it, right? To honor people's space and time. I even see some people in their email signatures that say, just because I email at a certain time due to my schedule, right? You don't need to email back. And so just saying that, like, I'm sending this, right? Because maybe I'm working late, but there is not the expectation for you to answer outside of business hours or while you're on vacation. And I think that's really important.
This reminds me of something my patient told me about, and I don't know exactly who came up with this concept, but it's the idea of leaving loudly. Are you familiar with this? Of
I
leaving
am not.
loudly?
I am
No.
not.
So it's it applies in in the office setting, in the virtual setting. It's just the idea of the manager or the leader of the team being very explicit in terms of saying when they are done for the day. So if this is, in the office, I feel like it's a little bit easier because you see them put on their coat, you see them walk out the door. But if you're on a Zoom call, for example, being very explicit, deliberate about saying, okay, you know what, this is my last call for the day. I'm done. I'm going to be signing off. If there's an emergency, call me. If not, I'll check the emails in the morning, because it gives it sounds so simple, but just giving people the permission to then also sign off, that it's huge. People are looking to you for what to do next, and so if you're the one that's sending emails at 11 p.m. at night, you're setting the tone for the rest of the team, the expectation that everyone else needs to be on too. And so, yeah, just being mindful of those actions that you take. It's so crazy to me how just, for example, checking email is the first thing that so many people do in the morning before they even get out of bed. They're already halfway through their inbox, and so being intentional, like you're saying, checking it twice a day, for example, that's what you are working on, that's what works for you. Figuring out what that looks like for you, and then being intentional about implementing that into your lifestyle, making it a habit. That's It takes energy, but it's so worth it in the long run.
It is. And I'm still a work in progress because often I will leave it up, right? And then I'm like, up, I'm answering, get out of Outlook, get out. So yeah, I think it's so important. I want to thank you so much for coming on and just want to see if you have any final thoughts to share with those who are watching or listening. This has been, I think, so helpful, so timely, is going to be so important to come back to as the pandemic continues and just as things in our society, unfortunately, continue to happen that may be triggering for individuals.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. And again, you know, give yourself the grace to slow down, to pause, and remember that mindset is medicine. That's going to be the best medicine for burnout. That's going to be able to help you identify those limiting beliefs, and then take action from there. So that's yeah. Those are the last words of wisdom to add.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to have you on. We will share your information in the chat. Your website just has a lot of great information, more information about you, how people can connect with you. And so we will share that in the chat. If you want to share any other ways that people can connect with you, please let us know.
Sure, yeah, yeah. No, ShellyBhowmik.com is where you'll find all this information. And, if you're in the New York City area and are interested in becoming a patient of the practice and having burnout screenings, again, visit the website. And if you're not in the New York City area and are just interested in coaching, that's also available to you. So it's all on the website there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. So appreciate you. Thank you all for watching episode 21 of Conversations with I Follow the Leader. How can rest save you from burnout? It's really important that I end because this conversation may have been triggering for some today that are going through burnout, have experienced burnout in the past, know others who are experiencing burnout. Also, just in the time of 2022 where we are now, it's important to acknowledge that Michelle Go, who is a Deloitte leader, was actually recently pushed to her death on a subway platform. And so I want to acknowledge for those who are going through that and may see this and it may make them sad or again be triggering, want to acknowledge that. Also want to acknowledge that the MARTA CEO unfortunately last week committed suicide in this way. And so we just want to take the time to acknowledge that this may be triggering for some and think that Shelly's framework is really helpful, not only for burnout, but in having these conversations, processing these conversations, right? To seek support, detect that distress. And so, really want to encourage people to do that. We will also put the information for the suicide hotline in the comments. We've shared it throughout promoting this discussion. So, if you are feeling in a burnout state or past burnout, we really want to provide you with the resources to seek the help that you need. Thank you so much for watching our conversation today and really hope it inspires you to rest and really seek that support. And remember that mindset is medicine. Thank you all so much.